Hey everyone, it's Tash Vanzetti, Discovery Coach and Mentor. We are coming to you live. I have the amazing Edye Hoffman with me today. And we're going to be talking about a really interesting topic, all about cognitive load and how we can be much more understanding of the brains and what we're putting them through as entrepreneurs, as we're testing our boundaries and, jumping out of a comfort zone and trying all these new and amazing things. And I think, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that we may not be aware of. I've got these notifications coming up. So, Edye, welcome to the chat tonight.
Hi, Tash. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah. So a little bit of background. Looks like we're live, so that's great. I met Edye in my 100K in 100 days group. So she came into that group, into that challenge that, was a crazy idea that I put out there to the world. And I had, a ton of people say yes to it. So that was crazy in itself. And Edye shared in the group a really cool insight into cognitive load and emotional load and all of those things that we probably don't have much of an understanding around. And I thought it was a conversation that we needed to share outside of that group. And also selfishly, I want to know a lot more about it. So yeah, Edye, if you want to give people a little bit of a background on what you're up to and why this is a topic that you know so much about.
Sure. So I'm an American living in the UK, and we came here originally to care for my husband's mother, who had been diagnosed young onset Alzheimer's disease at 56. And so it was a pretty shocking experience. And I'd never met anyone with dementia before. So very new to me, very a lot of discovery. And it went from being her caregiver to actually working with individuals with dementia, kind of branching on some of the experiences I have from community organizing and social anthropology into something where I'm working on with people today around cognitive function. And so I've moved from looking at dementia as what doesn't work to what is working, and how do we actually strengthen that? So that means then that we're suddenly looking at how the brain is compensating when we're under stress.
Yeah.
And that has been always really informative for me personally, but particularly informative for me as an entrepreneur. Because when we're in spaces where there's no guidebook, which is often the case when you're diagnosed with dementia, or when you're entering a new kind of filling the gap in a market where there's no guidebook, or you're experiencing entrepreneurialism for the first time, and there's all these new things to learn.
There's so much uncertainty on both sides as well. Constant uncertainty.
Absolutely. And what it does then is allow the brain to adapt and to really seek advantage, which I think is great for both. But recently, I think in your group, as I've listened to other people experience their own challenges and their own successes, I've really started to resonate more about kind of what I was feeling myself and what I've learned from the individuals who have a dementia diagnosis about where to find your resilience. Where are your strengths? How can you take good care of yourself? And some of the gaps in how we talk about self-care. And so that's where I came into the group and just said, I think actually talking about cognitive load, and I think sometimes cognitive load can have a negative connotation because it can be load as in pressure, but actually sometimes I think about it in the other way you can spell it, the LODE, like finding the mother load in something. So you can have cognitive load as in heavy, pressure, strain, or you can have the cognitive load of finding new strengths and really mining that and making that happen. So I think if I were to talk about cognitive load, I'd be talking about it from the LODE side of things, if I can play with words, or really cognitive fitness, which may be more in line with how we talk about physical fitness or our emotional health, things like that, because it really is on par with all those things that we're looking at.
Yeah, I love that term cognitive fitness, because I think we neglect the cognitive side of what we're doing. Like we try and take care of ourselves physically, or we know that we should. We implement all this so-called self-care when we're building businesses, but we are constantly pushing ourselves and our minds into so many unknown territories. And, I just don't think we give ourselves or our minds enough space to breathe and to sort of reset along the way. Totally. So can you explain a little bit about what our mind goes through every time we are coming up with new ideas, trying to figure out how to actually implement them, and then all of the other emotional stuff that comes up every time you're stretching that comfort zone and trying to do something new. So what is happening up there?
There's a lot going on. I think that, so a lot of you, if you've been reading business science, any sort of cognitive science, you'll have read a little bit more about how we actually can't multitask the way we thought we might be able to. We often think that that's actually the epitome of success. If you can be doing 2 or 3 things at one time, how efficient and fantastic. What a great use of your calorie load that is. But actually, the brain doesn't work that way because it's already multitasking. Everything that we do, everything we touch, all of the senses that we're engaging with are receiving data, and also receiving information. And then the memory, our brain, is looking back in our data bank of all the memories it's stored since birth, trying to access information to inform whatever it is that we're doing. So it might be that we've done something 1,000 times, and our brain is actually able to pull the data that allows us to do it in the most efficient and most excellent way, because we've just fine-tuned our bodies and brains to do that. But when it comes to new things, the brain is actually seeking information that is that might be associated with this, kind of the closest relationship it can find, and then drawing on that information and seeing if that's beneficial in that moment. And if it's not, you disregard it. But if it is, then you stash it as part of this new memory that you're experiencing. And the new neurons that we're creating every day till we die, really, are those things that are actually working on that kind of project building. And then that project or that experience gets stored in the brain to be pulled out later to reinform the new experiences that you're doing. So if you're new exciting things with family, there's a whole lot of information that can be pulled in and informing that experience that kind of settles you into a known kind of landscape that you can kind of bounce off of to experience this new adventure, new thing. But if you're new experiences where you don't know anyone, you're actually having to evaluate that much more information. Or if you're in a new deadline, for example, you set yourself a new deadline in a new territory that you haven't been experiencing before, you're having to set a whole new set of rules and pull in the information out that you can from your memory banks to inform the experience. Ideally,
so I've noticed myself, like I have a habit of multitasking, and sometimes I don't even realize I'm doing it. So I think, like you said, our brains try and create habits as often as they can to simplify their load and to sort of, make their life as easy as possible. And quite often these habits are there without us even realizing. And then, when we're trying to do all this new stuff all the time, it's kind of like your brain's in overdrive, trying to figure out, where do I put this? How do I do this?
It's constantly trying to prioritize what's most important, and ideally what's most important in keeping you safe. So it's one of the reasons why we can often forget what we're doing when we go into another room or up the stairs. Our brain is resetting and evaluating this new environment for new information. And so every time we're in a new environment, we kind of have to give our brains a chance to assess what's going on, to make relationships with that environment, those experiences, the humans involved. Use that as a moving forward point, and then go and then succeed. If it doesn't pull enough information, then that's when you start to feel stressful, because the brain is continuing to seek information, maybe not registering with your past experiences, and so setting you up for kind of almost a brain drain. So your cognitive exercise, your cognitive load, then the heaviness of it is increasing without the benefit.
Is that when we feel the overwhelm and the anxiety and sort of just that stress and that angst around, trying new things and trying to figure it all out at the same time?
Absolutely. We might actually feel a bit agitated, anxious. Stress can be a variety of things. It can actually be a moment of paralysis where you just forget everything, that kind of freeze moment, right? Where you're like, oh crap. And actually, if statistically speaking, our listeners are going to have been touched by dementia in some fashion. And if this is triggering for your relatives, when they're feeling agitated, anxious, stressed, paralyzed with kind of fear or contemplation, it's the same thing that we're going through. We can really relate to those moments where we've been stuck And we have to kind of figure out a way to take a step back, rethink our strategy, or step back and find some new resources in our surroundings that we can kind of use as an anchor to move forward. Same for entrepreneurs, same for people with dementia.
I know it's funny to me, and when you sort of did that original video in the 100K group, I was like, that makes so much sense. But we don't think about it. We're looking at the latest, tools and strategies and platforms and software and all of the latest things to do, but we're not taking care of, our brains up here and our minds and the thing that's going to keep us moving forward. And yeah, like you said, we get stuck in overwhelm, we get stuck in old habits, and we try and multitask, we try and do all the things, and it's just not viable to keep going like that.
No, and it's been really fun to kind of compare and contrast my work experience in the community with the experience online in this entrepreneurial. We talk a lot about going for the shiny things and being kind of there's a word for like collecting courses, collecting resources. And it totally makes sense because we want in this new environment to seek and collect as much data as possible to be as successful as possible, right? That's a growth mindset. We want that.
Yeah.
What we really do need to understand then is, what is our cognitive fitness? How do we maintain our cognitive health, and what's the best environment, the best kind of landscape to do this in? So for me, it's been learning around what are the best groups to be in? What kind of people do I surround myself with? Do I surround myself with people who tell me that what I do isn't possible? No. Yeah, exactly. Do I spend time with people who say that this isn't worthwhile? I should get a real job. I should be secure. No. But I probably don't actually spend time with people who are completely outside my realm, or who are pursuing something that I'm not interested in pursuing. And maybe then pull back from that and actually start to register on the spectrum of environments, people, surroundings, resources. Where's my happy point? Where's the point where I'm most cognitively fit?
Yeah. For those of you viewing live, make sure you let us know when you arrived. I can see a couple of people on coming and going. So say hi. Let us know if this is resonating with you. If you're coming back to watch the replay, again, let us know that you were here. And if you have any questions along the way, I know I'll be checking back in the comments, and I know Edye will be too. So let us know who comes along to join this conversation as we go. So on that note of, where do I start with this one? Wanting to collect all the courses, wanting to collect all of the templates and the opt-ins and all the different things that we want to, because we want to get it right. We want to know what we're doing next. And the 57, Facebook groups that we're all members of, how can we start to determine and start to give ourselves permission to filter that down and to stop? I call it consumption versus creation. So we get into consumption mode as we just collect everyone else's data. And then we get really overwhelmed and we get really stuck because we don't know how, the thing that we want to do doesn't seem as grand, or it doesn't seem as possible because we're comparing ourselves to everyone else. So what I encourage people to do is sort of bring back the consumption and get back into creation mode and get back into doing the things that are important to them and light them up and sort of switch things around a little bit. So have you got any suggestions on that front as to maybe, how we can sort of taper that down a little bit in collecting everything outside of us instead of taking care of what's in us and managing that a little bit better?
Okay, so I think I would take inspiration from your morning run. So throughout the 100 days, I've really enjoyed the reflections you had on your morning run.
I love the morning run.
I know. There's the consistency to it. There's a chance for you to have a successful moment first kind of moment of the day, right? You've ticked it off the list. You've had, one of the fantastic things about physical fitness is it sends endorphins, serotonin to the brain. So you've got all these happy chemicals that you're starting your day, which is fantastic, right? But you can actually apply that to cognitive fitness. So we do best when we practice. The more opportunity we have to practice, the better. Running with marathoners is okay on Sundays if they're training at our level, right? Watching a marathon race, fantastic, really inspiring. You get a sense for what that 26 miles is. But if we're starting out and at a 5K level, then probably running a marathon isn't a good thing. So it's a little bit about understanding kind of where your practice realm is. So if you're in startup or idea space, then you all right?
Yeah, you froze for a little bit. Just want to start that little bit again. So talking about running with marathoners.
Yeah, so it's a little bit about understanding how much your brain needs to practice as much as your body does. And the more you practice, the more opportunity your muscle memory has to establish itself in the setting and to kind of see itself in the setting. So when I signed up for your course, $100,000 was a little out of my realm for the quarter. And it certainly wasn't my goal because, I'm working on this book. This book is not going to make $100,000 until it's produced or published, right? So it's about practicing what I really want to have happen. I want to be surrounding myself with people who want to be successful. So I want growth mindset. I want to be around people where I can start to pull behaviors, skill sets to kind of adopt for myself. So the 100 days was for me, this is a chance to ramp up. So I'm not practicing when I'm actually have published the book. I want to be ready to go. So I was essentially running my 5Ks every day with the hope that at the end of the 100 days, I was ready to run my marathon or ready to run my next run. And we can do that same thing with cognitive fitness. So it's about understanding what your goal is and definitely set a goal.
Yeah.
And understand how to practice to get to it. And that practice can be anything from surrounding yourself by people who look and act like you want to look and act, right? So you're absorbing, your mind is taking on, as it's observing the Facebook groups and it's taking on the lives and things, it's taking on board different pieces of information that is sparking success and growth for next time. So surrounding yourself by those things is really, really valuable. It's also about understanding what secret weapons you need to kind of pull out when you're under stress. So if you're, when I talk to people with dementia, I talk about it as a secret weapon. Secret weapons for them can be an environment that they know already. So be in those spaces when you're endeavoring something new. Be with people that you know. And I often refer to myself as a secret weapon when they're in my groups because they can lean on me. They can feed off of my energy, my social cues, all of the information that I'm setting for somebody to move forward. Secret weapons can be people, places, they can be resources like a course tool. If you pick up one thing from a course that teaches 10 things, it's a win. Yeah. And celebrate the win. So
I'm a big advocate for celebrating the wins. I know in my momentum group as well, one of the tasks that I would set them is, you've got to set your goal, but then also set your reward. Like, how are we going to celebrate when you reach this? And I'm all about, thinking big and starting small. So we've got our goal over the 3 months. We're going to break that right down and then set your mini reward. So each time, so you get used to celebrating because I found that in my journey and a lot of the clients that I work with, we wouldn't celebrate enough. We just moved to the next thing and to the next thing and to the next thing. So it didn't feel like we were actually getting as further along as we probably were. We weren't acknowledging that success along the way. So I'm all for celebrating.
Have you noticed how when we're in school as children, we get marks, good grades, and we celebrate? There's like a big high five. It's stuck to the fridge in American fridges. It's celebrated in a variety of ways where people see and witness you for doing it. And there's a lot of evocative sense to that celebration. So you get responses, cognitive responses from people, whether they're really proud of you, you are included in the group, you're fit in, you might actually excel. But as adults, they're to-do lists. And they are. Off, which have no evocative sense to the celebration, right? So there's nothing really for the brain to latch onto that says, this was a big win. This was a huge success. Fantastic. Go celebrate. We're often told, oh, it's okay. Win and move on. But actually, we need to stop and celebrate. And I think that's where the Facebook groups especially can be really valuable because you can come on, especially as a Facebook Live, how lucky is this? And say, oh my gosh, I have this big win. And allow people to reflect back that this is really important because your brain is storing all that information about that was fantastic. That benchmark is going to move you to something really extraordinary. Use this memory and this success as something to turn to later as you're pushing the envelope again and again.
Yeah. It reinforces that you are capable of doing things you've never done before and succeeding at things you've never done before. And that's what I love about, you know, Facebook groups and private communities and things like that. You're in a safe space where you can celebrate your wins that maybe you don't want to share publicly, or maybe your family and your friends don't really understand why reaching that next milestone in your business or getting that new client or getting that gig, whatever it is a great win for you. Like, not everyone gets that. I know my family still don't quite understand what I do. And that's okay, because I have enough other people around me that support me and that do understand. So I know, depending on what I'm celebrating, I know who I can celebrate with. And that's a really important thing for all of us, to find those groups of people that we can celebrate with that understand it, and also encourage that celebration as well. Because, yeah, it's really easy to get your head down and your bum up and off we go, tick, tick, tick down that list, and get to the end of the year going, I haven't really done anything. I'm not as far ahead as I want. And really, you've done a lot. Like the growth that I've seen in this 100K in 100 days group, not everyone has reached the 100,000 goal, but it wasn't about the money. Like you said, it was about that, getting into that environment of growth and pushing yourself forward from wherever your starting point was. I want you to push forward and to grow and to see what you're capable of. Some people have hit 100K, some people haven't, but I think everyone that participated has grown, and that has been an amazing thing to watch along the way.
Yeah, and I love how it set everyone up for success in the future, because now we have these cognitive memories of success, and we've seen potentially how it could be done for ourselves, which is all data that we're recording, right, for further information later. So anytime that we can build those blocks is really beneficial for our cognitive health as well as our emotional health, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you surround yourself and you keep getting reinforcement that these things are possible, that you're reaching for, then again, it just keeps you going, keeps you moving forward, and helps you do the things that you want to do.
I think there's one more thing to that, Natasha. I think that it's also about understanding that being an entrepreneur is lonely. There is a level of isolation. You are not setting up a business where you walk into a community, a corporate community you can work with and fit into. And so it's really important to make sure that we understand just what level of isolation we're willing to tolerate, what's good for us and what's not good for us, and then make the arrangements that we need to make sure that we're getting the information that we need. What kind of peer groups, what kind of masterminds, what kind of coaches are good for us to create that space so that we're not feeling isolated. Because when we feel isolated, the brain is actually starting to protect us. Yeah. So it's starting to kind of take a step back and say, actually, this might not be a safe space. We're safer often in communities. And if we're isolated, then what does that mean for us? And I think that's sometimes why people step away from their own challenges, is because the brain is telling them that actually this is too much. It's too costly to do this. And that actually the rewards might be better somewhere else. Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's just trying to protect us and make our life easier. But that's not always what we want.
No, and it's not always. I think one of the things to think about is that our brain isn't necessarily pulling out the information that it needs to inform us of the good experiences. It's doing the best it can, but in these new environments, they're not often good matches. And so understanding actually what you want and what you don't want. So giving yourself permission to say, that's not the memory that actually is going to inform this experience. I'm going to go for creating a new one, or I'm going to use this modeling or this other example that works better. Permission can be really important for the brain because it allows us to say, actually, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. And so now, because I've decided this, you do really need to pull out the memories I need to make this useful, or store all the good ones, because we are moving forward. I know what's best for us.
Yeah. I was just about to ask you about permission, so you segued perfectly into that. I think that's really important, because often too we will set ourselves, I did a Facebook Live this morning on our expectations that we set. Quite often we're our own worst enemy in the fact that we set such high expectations of what we believe we can achieve or what we think we should achieve within a certain period of time. And things can change. Sometimes we meet those expectations and sometimes we can't, or we don't. So I think giving ourselves permission to adjust those expectations accordingly, and to maybe come up with some new ones, or to also just permission to let some things go, I think can be a big challenge for some people. So have you found that as well in sort of the permission side of things?
Yeah, and I think there's actually not necessarily a gender difference, but a difference in kind of how women and maybe high emotional intelligence feeds into that, right? So how many things are we managing, and what are we willing to give ourselves permission to do and not do? And sometimes in our family roles, we have certain experiences too, where we have responsibilities that we have to respond to regardless of whether we're an entrepreneur or whether we're ambitious, just plain ambitious, right? We have to start managing them. And so it's about not necessarily juggling, but prioritizing them and recognizing that it's not just about physical health. It's not just about emotional health, but it is about cognitive health too. There's only so many decisions that you can make. And so if we give ourselves permission to make certain decisions, we're at less risk of decision fatigue, where we're actually making poor decisions. And that's often where you see people cascade and just kind of, maybe you'll see a series of sicknesses where they just, their immune system is compromised. They can't seem to get ahead of themselves. The fatigue, the cognitive fatigue that we're experiencing is actually taking a toll on our bodies. We burn calories when we think. We don't actually calculate that in our runs and in our swims and all those sorts of things, but we are burning calories when we think. So evaluating those things for permission rather than reaction can be really beneficial.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm just coming out of an illness at the moment, and I think you've got a bit of a cold as well. So, but I have noticed whenever I go through another big phase of growth, or I've stretched myself out of my comfort zone again, or you know, dropped another layer of, you know, protection or whatever barriers or stories I had around that, I seem to, my energy dips down and I get sick. And I think it is just like you've been saying, is that I've overloaded myself so much without realizing it, and probably set some fairly high expectations on myself that I wasn't giving myself enough space, or just wasn't able to see the signs soon enough that something was about to dip down. So, yeah. And I've noticed coming out of the illness that my energy levels, it's taking its time to come back. You know, I'd sort of wake up and I'd feel good and I'd go to jump back into things, and an hour later I'm ready for another nap. So, again, I've had to give myself permission to just come back slowly and to ease into things, and not to expect to catch up on 2 weeks of stuff and to-do lists in, you know, a couple of hours.
So. Definitely. I can relate to that. The other thing I'm going to ask is that just kind of triggered while you were talking is, do you find that those spaces are creative though? Because I do.
The downtime? The
recovery time is often the time when because the to-do lists aren't pressing, maybe, not pressing all the time, they are pressing, but then a time or an opportunity to just kind of let the brain just produce information, be creative, and start to unfold things that maybe the pressure that we were experiencing before we got sick wasn't allowing for space. Yeah.
So, the recovery time for me, I did a video, I think in the group the other day, that it was actually really good reflection time that I hadn't allowed myself enough of. Like, I am great at getting out in the mornings, and that hour first thing in the day, usually before my family are awake, I'm usually out before the sun comes up. And that hour is gold to me. Like, it's such a beautiful place to be. You've got the fresh air, the water, the birds are singing. Like, it's just such a magical way to start my day. And that's my mental reset. I reset, I recalibrate. And the days I don't get to do that, I don't feel quite right. You know, I feel like I'm missing something, or I'm having to push a little bit harder than I would normally push. So I love that time. But when I was unwell and sort of coming back out of it and had no choice but just lie there and rest, it was a really great way to sort of have a different perspective on things, and to sort of realize that some of the things I was wanting to do or planning to do weren't as important as I thought they were. And also just to see things from a different angle. I think it's really important, and to sort of give our brain free space just to explore along the way.
Definitely. One of the things that cognitively they're talking more and more about is how exercise can be really beneficial even in small spurts of time, right? So even for like 7 minutes, it can be beneficial. So we often think it has to be an hour. We often think it has to be a 5K or 10K or some significant workout, but actually it can just be a really short period of time that our physical bodies benefit. But I think our cognitive bodies benefit, our cognitive health benefits too, because you're going into spaces where your muscle memory is rehearsing what it's done. Yeah. So even if you were to walk your morning walk, or do 15 minutes of your morning run, you know, even if you were to just shorten it, your brain is pulling out all those positive memories that's informing good health, that's informing success. So definitely take advantage of those things, because they're kind of your secret weapon.
Well, that's the thing. I often find that if I am feeling stuck and heavy and overwhelmed and I'm not feeling as light as I want to be, I will literally just, because I live quite close to the lake here, I will literally just go for a walk around the block or, down to the lake and just give myself 10 minutes even. And just that change of scenery and that reset and that just changing gears completely, again, it resets me so much. So Bridget, hello, thanks for jumping on. I'm just going to put this comment up here so everyone can see it, and then I'll bring it back down because it's chopping our faces off. So she's saying, oh, wow, this is also valuable. Thinking I may experience cognitive overload, moving to a new home in a new area and throwing myself into working on my biz full time all at once. Yep. We'll definitely be revisiting this for strategies to manage it all. Absolutely. And yes, then your little walks on the beach are your saviour. And that's the thing. We have, we try and do so much and we think, we are so capable. And technically, yes, we can do a lot and we are very capable. But I've done that, a few iterations of Tash ago. I was the overachiever. I had everyone sorted. If anyone wanted anything done, they would come to me because I would get it done for them. And I was very efficient, so I thought. But what would happen is I kept burning out and everyone else was happy except for me because they would get everything done and I'd just be feeling smaller and more depleted as I went along. Now, I'm getting better at that, but I still find occasion that I do fall into that trap of trying to think I can do it all at the same time. And I think, like you said, on the permissions, we just have to be okay with letting some things go or just parking them to one side for a little while and knowing that it's okay not to do everything right now. I think that's been one of my biggest lessons is because I come up with so many great ideas that I want to implement, but when I try and do them all, I don't do anything really well. So, yeah, giving myself permission just to pull back and just to, take smaller steps, I guess, is a fun way to do it and still enjoy my downtime at the end of the day.
Definitely. I think that's one of the reasons for delegating that we don't talk about. We often talk about delegating as it gets more done, it's maybe financially viable, or it's allowing us to pursue ideas or be the idea makers that we need to be while other people are doing the tasks that are kind of maintaining our business. But actually, it's really important to delegate because we want all these things done. So looking at it from a point of growth, how do I make sure that I get all of these things done and still maintain my health so that we're actually producing the ideas that we need to? We underestimate, I think, how much energy it takes to be idea maker and SEO manager and website, creator, and all of the things that we do for entrepreneurial endeavors, right? There's so many small things that we have to manage that when it comes to the big idea making and the actual keeping the energy, kind of our eye on the ball and pushing the energy for our businesses, we really do have to prioritize what we're willing to delegate so that we can continue to be the idea maker. That
absolutely
tendency to think that should come naturally, but it doesn't when you consider our to-do lists.
No, and just that context switching all the time from one to the thing to the next. And we're often doing a lot of jobs that aren't really our sweet spot. They're not really our superpower. We can do them and we can do them well, but I know some jobs drain me quite a bit, and other jobs, I can lose 6 hours doing something and I'm in heaven. So yeah, getting better at delegating that too. Sorry.
Can we have more of those, please?
Yeah.
Moments.
And I've also delegated some of the chores in the house too. My daughter was looking for some extra pocket money, so I'm like, great, that's 2 extra nights a week you can cook dinner. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Well done. There's just a couple of things to touch on when it comes to taking on new challenges like Bridget was talking about. There's some really good cognitive science that talks about how it takes us 6 weeks to learn a habit. And we often think of that as kind of, I'm going to drink more water or I'm going to try this new exercise, but it actually works for familiarizing ourselves in new environments. So when we move offices or we move home or we move experiences, recognizing that it's going to take 6 weeks for our brains to kind of to assess the landscape and become familiar with the environment enough for our muscle memory, all of the cognitive systems that are working for us to relax and allow us to actually move on that autopilot we all love. So giving ourselves permission for taking on that kind of new habitual learning, that new habit forming in new spaces can be really valuable.
Yeah, and I think it's something we don't often pay attention to is we think moving is the physical move and you get everything unpacked. But then you're right, you do have to familiarize yourself with everything, learn where everything is again, whereas before it was just a habit, it was autopilot, it was just, you knew what to do and where to go and where to park when you went to the new supermarket and all of those things, and it's all learning. So Bridget, please be kind to yourself over the next few weeks.
Definitely.
Very important. Now, I've got some notes here that I just brought up from the video that I was watching earlier that we went through. And there's, how our brains prepare us for risks and challenges. Can you I know we touched on that a little bit before, but I think it's a really important one to understand for people, because as entrepreneurs, when we are building businesses, if we're leaving our jobs, I know a few people in the group have decided to leave their jobs or make a big change, and there's going to be a lot of doubt and sort of second guessing that comes into that decision. So how can we kind of prepare ourselves for when our brain thinks there's a risk ahead of us and wants to shut us down, to assessing those a little bit better?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think walks can be really valuable, especially if you're thinking about it, because it allows the brain to, not under stress, start to recall information that is positive for that experience. So actually, pattern disruption can be really valuable. So taking yourself out of your everyday so that your brain is in more creative mode, in more hunter-gatherer mode, right? So gathering information that it can use to be beneficial can be really, really good. For me, it's going on walks or just setting aside and having a cup of coffee or something. And actually, welcome, Bridget, that's great. Actually giving our brains a chance to just kind of have free thinking about it, because you've given yourself permission to take on the risk. So about creating new experiences and new growth, and any sort of memories that you can recall that you like about those experiences. For me, it's a lot, my kind of growth memories that I try to focus on are when I was swimming competitively and what it was like to train for something, and recognize that under stress, I could do anything for 20 minutes. I really can. So this is about me just pushing through a little bit, not a long time. I can't do everything or anything for 2 weeks, but I can certainly do something for 20 minutes. And if I can get to the 20 minutes and reach the goal, then I'm golden. And training, practicing actually sets me up for success. And I don't need to win every swim meet to improve. I can actually win every swim meet or every other swim meet, right? And still progressing. So I'm pulling from positive experiences where I've seen myself successful. I've felt it, and there's been some evocative memories that I can pull up and say, yeah, that would be really cool to experience again.
Yeah.
I can also pull from other experiences. This is why we're so often drawn to reading autobiographies or memoirs, or seeing people, movies are great about watching someone ascend past a challenge and meeting that. Our brain is taking on the language and the vocal language and the body language of what we see when we're watching films. Excuse me. So we're storing all that information for when we are about to hit some kind of big challenge or experiencing some new endeavor or new deadline. The trick is, though, just if I could add one thing, to give yourself permission to kind of step back if you are encountering something you've never experienced before. So I'm having to do this as I'm going through the book editing process. The book writing process was really creative. It was a lot of fun. It was quite safe for me cognitively. I had kind of worked it into my schedule, and I knew what needed to happen in order for it to do. But for editing, it's a completely new ballpark. I haven't experienced a lot of this, so I have very few memories to pull from, and I don't have a sense for how to manage my time to do it. So I'm really having to think more on a meta level about not only what do I need to edit, but how will I do it? And I think successful entrepreneurs really are able to look at those two different levels on a regular basis. So touching on what needs to happen in the day-to-day, but also how am I doing?
I think as adults, we're not very good at being beginners again. We expect that we can, we've spent our lifetime, or we've built careers in industries that, gave us a lot of success, and we knew what we were doing, and we knew what the benchmarks were, we knew what was expected, and we did a really great job. it was hard work, but it wasn't really. Like, we kind of showed up every day knowing what the landscape was. And then we come out and we try all these new things. And the first few times we try anything, it's a bit sucky, to be honest. We're not that great at it. And we start to lose faith and we start to think, well, I'm terrible. Like, this is never going to work. But what we forget, like you said, we forget that everything we start from, like everything, we have to start from the beginning. Every new thing we try, we have to start from the beginning. Every job we've had to learn from the beginning. And we forget that the first few days, weeks, months, we're a bit shaky and we're a bit uncertain. And I think once we remind ourselves that, you know, we can only get better, there's always opportunities for growth. I'm a big believer that there is no failure. It's just another opportunity for growth, another way to, you know, pull the lessons from that little exercise, but give ourselves permission to be a beginner again when we are trying something new, and not be so hard on ourselves instead of thinking that we have to figure it out the first or second time we give it a go. So, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. When I'm working with the individuals with the diagnosis, we talk a lot about how it's not about trial and error. It's about trial and if we are actively learning from what we're trialing, then there are no errors. It's just about self-correction, understanding, learning opportunities. Definitely. I think that also goes back to, I think why I enjoy turning to a coach. I grew up with some amazing swimming coaches who had some really, I had also bad swimming coaches, which probably was a good thing because now I know a little bit about what doesn't work for me. But great swimming coaches were people who actually allowed me to push myself further, but also held me back a bit. So weren't constantly striving for me just to win. They were striving for me to be better. And it's informed what kind of coaches I want in my entrepreneurial journey too. I don't necessarily want a coach that is constantly criticizing me for not pushing harder, or judging me for understand. So I have this dual life right now. I have this community program that I'm supporting, but I'm also doing this entrepreneurial book, online learning kind of resource thing. And when I'm working with a coach on the book, I'm not often talking about the community resources and my commitment to those. So if I had a coach that was saying, you're not committing enough, you're not serious enough about this, they would actually be not taking into consideration the fact that I am balancing these other things. And I think understanding what kind of people we want around us and what kind of verbal messages we want as we're pushing into these new spaces can be really, really valuable.
Oh, absolutely. I've had lots of different types of coaches over the years, some better than others. Some were great coaches and got great results with other people, but they weren't right for me. But I didn't realize that at the time. So I would walk away thinking I was the failure, when really it was just a bit of a mismatch. Like, it wasn't the best union. And yeah, I love that. You really have to consider what it is you actually need right now. Like, there are so many different types of coaches and there are so many different types of things that you can be out there learning and getting support in. But it's really important to think, okay, where am I at right now? What is the most important foundation piece that I need to put in place to help me keep that growth going and to help me understand and to help me implement? So, yeah, I know a lot of the clients will come to me and they say, oh, I've bought all these programs and I've got all these strategies, but I'm not implementing them. And when we dial back down, they haven't got those foundation pieces in place that help them understand why they're doing what they're doing, what's stopping them, and sort of getting that strength back from a mental perspective. I call it the mind shit, mastering your mind shit and all those stories that are at play to keep us small. Once they get that in place, they can go and implement everything they've got sitting in there waiting in their digital library. But until they get that foundation piece in place, they're going to keep buying courses and consuming everyone else's information and not taking the action that they need to take. Okay, so Bridget's got another comment here. I'm just going to bring that up. So true. What used to take me 4 hours when I started my accounts job now takes me half an hour. I remind myself of that often when I feel like my biz work is taking so long. Exactly. That's the thing. We expect everything to be figured out yesterday, or we see everyone around us doing things so quickly and efficiently, and we're like, why can't we do that? And they've probably been doing it a lot longer than we have. Or we all have different strengths. Like, some people will pick up design really quickly and have a great eye for it. Other people, just won't. It's just not their strength. Some people are great communicators. Some people aren't. Like, everyone has their own strength. And I think once you understand your strengths and your style, how you naturally show up in the world, it's much easier for you to navigate, okay, who are the people I need to support me and what are the things I need to focus on? Because, I just think there's so many different variables to that question.
Definitely. Absolutely. And I think there's another kind of thing that's going on in Western culture right now that it's interesting because working with older people, I think it's informing how I want to spend the next 50 years of my life, right?
Yeah.
So we spend so much time trying to be more efficient and save calories and energy so that we can do more or have more free time. And so the mindset seems to be, I have to be able to do things faster. I have to be able to, and so we collect technology, right? So it's no longer, I don't need to vacuum. I can actually buy a remote vacuum that'll vacuum for me, so I won't have to spend that energy or that time. But what we're actually also doing is taking away the skills that we have developed through our lives. So all the time that we are in school, we're into early career, early entrepreneurship, we are under tension. Our bodies and brains are under tension to perform. And all of it seems to be kind of, we're working towards it to get kind of achieve and then be able to relax.
Yeah.
So that's great, except that we have a tendency to think that should be retirement. That should be kind of our later years or our successful stories in our careers. But that's actually not when we thrive.
No.
We thrive under tension. The question is, what's the appropriate level of tension for us to succeed? And can we create that happy moment? And that's where the flow comes in, right? We talk a lot about finding those spaces of flow where everything's in union. And I think it's a little bit about understanding what tension is healthy tension, right? We've talked about unhealthy in that sense that we kind of get sick or things have gone pear-shaped. But actually, the tension that we were under was good for us too, because it meant that we were really working our bodies the way they're meant to be worked, right?
Yeah.
Able to respond. And if we aren't doing that, if we are constantly being able to shortcut or insert tools to do stuff for us, then we're actually not thriving. So one of the things I'm drawn to is underdog stories where people are striving to do something. I'm not really attracted to stories of achievement where they've been at the top of their game for years and kept it there. That's not the story that speaks to me right now. And I think it's a bit about understanding what is that happy tension. What can you push yourself to do? And what do you want to do? What are your priorities for learning more? Which I think then clears that mind shit, right?
Yeah.
That you're talking about, because then you're suddenly driven in a direction that you want to be going. I think that makes sense. I'm still working on that one.
That's okay. I mean, I know a lot of people I've worked with, a lot of people I've worked alongside, we think, they think they're striving for something in particular, and it always feels hard, and it's always an effort, and it's always a push. And when we step back and take a look at it, they're actually going after someone else's idea or someone else's dream or someone else's version of what they think they should be creating. And when we wind it back and we sort of reevaluate and say, okay, but what do you actually want? What are your strengths? What's your natural style? And we kind of pivot them accordingly. And it's amazing to watch, to see the difference in the energy and the effort that things take, and things are happening in a much different way. And I think also with all the technology and all the do and having to be so efficient, we're actually not very good at taking a break these days. We're actually not very good at just doing nothing and knowing that that's okay and not feeling guilty about this. Because, again, that old version of me that was constantly busy and doing all the things, it didn't feel right for me to just take a day off and do nothing. I always felt like I had to be doing something. I had to be productive in some way. Years of practice led me to that habit. And it's taken me years again to unravel that habit and to be okay with taking my time to get to the office in the morning if that's what I feel like doing, spending an extra bit of time in the morning, having breakfast, relaxed breakfast with my family instead of rushing through to get everyone out the door in time. Little things like that, taking the night off, putting my feet up in the middle of the day. Like, it's really important that we create that space within our day, especially when we are constantly pushing ourselves and testing ideas and, creating new habits each and every day that are going to serve us and our businesses. I think it's really important that we remember that we need to take a break and, allow our minds and our bodies and emotionally, physically, energetically, the works to actually reset and recalibrate as we're going through this. It's like, if you get a new car and you drive it flat out around, go for a nice big road trip, you're going to let that car rest eventually, aren't you? You're going to park it for the night and let it just sort of let the engine cool down and let it reset. But what we try and do when we're excited about building our business is we try and drive the car around and around and around and around, and we don't let the car rest and we don't let the engine cool down. And that's kind of what we do to ourselves. So, yeah, just a reminder for anyone that's in that cycle at the moment, you have to stop and just be okay with taking a little break sometimes.
Definitely. I think that goes back to permission too. I have a fantastic friend who, when something comes up like that, she'll kind of, if she has any self-doubt about her decision that she's made, she'll say, hold on, I'm the boss. And she has a certain behavior that she does with her body that reflects it in her kind of muscles about like, I am the boss. I get to decide it. We often don't think about that because we're thinking we're not quite the boss. We haven't quite achieved that picture of what that looks like yet. But actually, we're the boss today. And I think everyone in these Facebook groups that we're in actually sees us as bosses, right? We don't have to convince them, but we just have to convince ourselves that today I'm the boss and I get to decide if I'm going to be late for work because I make good decisions. And this is the decision that I'm making today.
Yeah. I know it's, like a few weeks back, I sort of put a post up on a Friday afternoon that, I asked the boss if I could take the rest of the day off, and she said yes. And it's like, here I am on my bed with Netflix and some ice cream. I'm like, this is the best. Because I needed a break. I needed to take a break. It had been a big week. And I'm like, you know what? It's 1 o'clock on a Friday and I'm done. I don't have to wait till 5 o'clock.
Yeah, and it's crucial for us as entrepreneurs to do that because we don't have an institution that's setting those days off for us. In any other environment, we would have a day off where we weren't expected to be in, whether it was school or a work commitment or a church commitment or anything like that. They expect us on certain days. They do not expect us on others.
Exactly.
But it doesn't work that way.
No, it's always ticking in the back of your mind about the next idea or the next thing, or it's really hard just to completely switch that off. I think that's, So,
I think that's where we can sometimes fall down because we're pushing and striving and our ambition is driving us to do certain things. And there might even be a should message in there somewhere. I really should be working. But actually, I would encourage people to say, actually, that should maybe isn't the right memory I need to pull from my memory bank. Maybe what I do need is to this is a spring break day, and that's okay. That this is about keeping everything charged, just like you give a car a rest. Fantastic analogy. That this body needs a rest too, and this brain needs a rest. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's the thing. We're used to resting our bodies. Perhaps we're used to fueling it the right way, but we're not often considering that cognitive load that we are creating and the strain that we are putting on ourselves mentally to constantly reinvent and learn new things and push new boundaries and come up with new ideas and create a different version of ourselves again and again and again and again. I mean, there's people that go to their job and they do their thing and they do that for 10, 20, 30 years. They don't have the same strain and the pressure of constantly reinventing. And I think that's a really important fact point that we need to all remember when we are pushing and growing, that reinventing yourself all the time to become a different version of yourself constantly is bloody hard work sometimes. And we don't allow ourselves to believe that or understand or acknowledge that enough.
Yeah, I think just to touch on that, I think it's going to be really important for us to learn. We don't understand what causes cognitive impairment in older life, right? But we are learning a great deal about the impact of how we live today and our intentions for today. And having those intentions square and true to us is going to be really important, I think, for our coming years, because we may very well live to be 110, 120. And we want to be as fit as possible in all of the realms of our body and mind.
Yeah.
I think if you're striving to be somebody that you aren't feeling like you are today, I think it's going to be really important to recognize that kind of alter ego actually needs to work only sometimes, not all the time. So recognizing just how much energy you have to maintain those things and then give your brain a rest. Really important.
One of the ladies in the group she did a little post today just sort of recapping or refreshing and reflecting on the last 100 days. And it was really beautiful. She said she would strive and strive and strive and strive for all these things. But what she's realized in this last 100 days is everything she was working for, everything she wanted, she actually had right now. She just hadn't seen it. She hadn't acknowledged it. And I thought that was such a beautiful realization for her, because she had those things. She had freedom. She had flexibility. She had time. She had all the things, but she didn't see it. She was striving, when I get this, or when I reach that goal, when I achieve this, then I can have all those things. And when we went through sort of some different reflection, she's like, oh, I actually have that right now. But she hadn't acknowledged it. She hadn't identified it. So, yeah, that was really nice to watch.
So let me ask, Cash, do you think that it's possible to thrive as you're pursuing to be an entrepreneur instead of striving?
Thriving?
Yeah.
I think so.
We are entrepreneurs.
Sorry?
I think about how long we've been at or will be at being an entrepreneur, right? And there isn't really a medal at the end of this journey, right? That says, I'm no longer an entrepreneur, or I'm successful as this, I'm a successful businesswoman. Okay.
I think the thriving comes from actually creating those moments of permission along the way, and identifying that what you are working towards, you probably have right in front of you right now. So for me, I believe I'm thriving so much more than when I was in my corporate job. My hours are different. My stress levels are different, but I'm a very different person to what I was back then. I seem to be peeling back the layers and understanding that life is about right now. And yes, I'm always striving for other things, but I am thriving in the freedom that I've created in my life, and the flexibility that I've created in my life, and the journey that I've been on. And I think for some of us, I'm one of these people that I've come so far down that path of discovery and being fiercely curious about what's next, and all these different layers of possibility, that I could never go back to just not evolving anymore and just being happy with the status quo, if that makes sense. But that's in my makeup. I think everyone's very different in how they approach it. But yeah, what do you think? What's your experience?
I agree. Yeah, I think I'm at a point where I'm thinking I can strive for certain periods of time. So it goes back to, if I can do anything for 20 minutes, or I can get to this deadline in 10 days time. But I actually realized this entrepreneurial journey is going to be a very long one for me. I have quite a few goals that are up in the future. So I can't be striving to be an entrepreneur or striving to be successful. I need to thrive in this period of time. I need to be able to look back and say, that was a fantastic trip. I'm so glad I did it. Rather than, oh my gosh, I regret it was such hard work. It was not worth it. I think that would cause a lot of cognitive dissonance for me. That wouldn't be an okay thing.
Yeah, when I first started, I was in that strive mode, and I would, I couldn't sleep because I was thinking about things. So I'd be up at 4 a.m. studying something, trying to learn something, like shoving information into my brain. And then I'd go into mum mode when the kids got up, and then I'd go back into work mode, and then I get family mode sorted. And then I would still work or learn, or be watching or trying to learn or do something for late at night. And it was a really vicious cycle. I thought I was creating freedom, and I wasn't. But I was also spending a lot of time on the wrong things. Like I was in consumption rather than creation. I was creating habits that weren't serving me, that weren't emotionally sustainable for me. Financially, they were sustainable, but not emotionally. And I think that's been a big eye-opener for me is, it has to be, yes, financially sustainable, but emotionally sustainable, and physically sustainable as well. So I work a lot less now than I used to. And sure, my to-do list it's never finished. But I'm okay with that. I'm okay with giving myself the night off, knowing that it will be there for me in the morning. Still prioritizing what's important, but just not pushing so hard. Allowing myself to have that downtime along the way is really important. And to enjoy the flexibility and the freedom that I've created, to spend that time with my kids after they get home from school, and to do other things that I want, and to go and have lunch with a girlfriend if I want to, and not think that I have to be tied to the office 24/7. So maybe learned that the hard way, but it was a good lesson.
Lessons are lessons. Some of them hurt more than others, I think, but lessons are lessons.
Absolutely. All right. Wow, we've been talking for an hour. That's amazing. Thank you to your voice for holding out for that long.
Yeah. I think go ahead.
Yeah. Any last things you want to share with our viewers, for people coming back to watch the replay, or for people considering that maybe they haven't paid attention to their cognitive load, or what, how they can sort of understand this concept a little bit more?
I think it's just starting to integrate what your cognitive fitness, your ideal cognitive fitness looks like, and keep that in mind. Your brain will work on that. It'll chew on that for a little while and start to inform. That's easy. But it is a balance. It's not necessarily just about focusing on your physical fitness or your emotional health. There is, I think, especially as entrepreneurs, especially as we are on these journeys with no guidebook, it is really about recognizing our cognitive health is important too. And recognize, I think, that we will always have a to-do list. Successful people always will. There's no opportunity to say that to-do list is done and I can walk away. That would mean we wouldn't have any reason to come home from a holiday, and that would make a holiday not a holiday. So there's a whole thing that I'm not willing to do. But I think actually recognizing that the to-do list, we benefit cognitively if our to-do list is managed. So recognizing and giving it a bit more information so that we're making good decisions, so that it's not owning us, is going to be really important to our mental health, our emotional health. So I think people who endeavor to be entrepreneurs, you're really exciting to be around. And it's always inspiring to be in a Facebook group or in a meeting, a face-to-face meeting, where there's so much energy and drive and just incredible creative problem solving. I think stay in these groups. They can be amazing, but also pick your groups wisely, because not every group is for everybody. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And sometimes you just have to go and try a few out and then see which ones energize you, and which ones,
absolutely.
if they feel like hard work, then that's not the place for you to be.
No, I think it's a lot of kind of understanding if you're a long distance runner or a short distance runner, a fast or a slow, if you're introverted, extroverted, all those kind of factors of who you are and what your energy levels are can inform the best social environments for you to be in. Definitely.
Yeah. Awesome.
Tash, thanks for this. It's been super fun.
Yeah, I've loved this conversation. I'm always curious about what else is, like, what's out there, and helping, as a discovery coach, helping myself discover what's next for me, and about the work that I do, but just understanding my own processes, but also helping other people do the same. So I really appreciate you coming on today. I can't wait for people to see this replay and just really get a new level of understanding as to what's actually going on, because I think this is the missing piece for a lot of people. Like, we've got the to-do list, we've got the checklist, we've got the programs, but if we're not understanding our cognitive load and our cognitive fitness, then it's going to, hamper our success a little bit. So it's been awesome. Thank you very much, Edye, for chatting with us today. Thank you for everyone watching. Thank you for coming back if you've been here on the replay. And yes, we will talk soon. All right. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.